To use the navigation computer as a time, speed and distance computer, we utilize the apex of the 60 index on the inner scale. If we're given a distance and a speed, we can calculate the time taken to travel that distance by setting the 60 index on the inner scale against the speed on the outer scale. Now, if we locate the distance on the outer scale, we can read off the time on the inner scale against that distance. For example, if we're travelling at 110 knots over the ground for a distance of 90 nautical miles, how long will it take us? It would be prudent for us to get an order of magnitude of the answer. The mathematically minded amongst you will probably already know that dividing distance by speed gives us time. If our ground speed is 110 nautical miles per hour, we'll require a little less than 1 hour to cover 90 nautical miles. Now let's use our navigation computer to calculate the answer. Set the 60 index against 110 on the outer scale, and using the cursor against 90 on the outer scale, read off the elapsed time of 49 minutes on the inner blue scale. You'll notice the inner blue scale is graduated in minutes for distance and time calculations, while the inner white scale is graduated in minutes and hours. On the inner white scale, hours are subdivided as follows: from 1 to 2 hours in 5-minute intervals, with each 10-minute interval being identified by the actual figure. From 2 to 5 hours, the subdivisions are at 10-minute intervals, with each 30 minutes being identified by the actual figure. Thereafter, hours are subdivided into unmarked 10-minute intervals. Let's now see how the inner white scale is used to calculate leg times in excess of 1 hour. For example, let's work out the duration of a flight if we have a ground speed of 95 knots and a distance of 127 nautical miles to fly. First, we'll do a rough mental calculation. If we have to travel 127 nautical miles at a ground speed of 95 nautical miles an hour, we're going to take between 1 and 2 hours to cover the distance. Now set the 60 index mark against 95 on the outer scale, and then position the cursor against 127 on the outer scale. Read off the duration of the flight, 80 minutes, or 1 hour and 20 minutes, on the inner scale. To find our speed over a given distance, first set the elapsed time on the inner scale against distance on the outer scale. Then the speed may be read off on the outer scale against the 60 index on the inner scale. Let's use an example to illustrate the method. If we've travelled a distance of 145 nautical miles in 68 minutes, what is our average ground speed for the journey? We can get a ballpark idea of the answer by saying that as our elapsed time is just more than 1 hour, our speed will be just less than 145 knots. Align 68 on the inner scale with 145 on the outer scale. Use of the cursor may help with accuracy. Using the cursor, read off our speed of 128 knots on the outer scale against the 60 index on the inner scale. To calculate the distance travelled, given an elapsed time and a known speed, place the 60 index against the speed on the outer scale. Read off the distance on the outer scale against the time on the inner scale. For example, if our ground speed is 87 knots and the time that has elapsed is 29 minutes, what's the distance that we have travelled? 29 minutes is almost half an hour, so we should travel just less than half of 87 nautical miles. Set the 60 index against 87 on the outer scale. Using the cursor, read off the distance on the outer scale against the time, 29, on the inner scale. The answer is 42 nautical miles.